What's up guys, this is Anime Crossover. I'm back with another episode of What If Naruto Was Trained by the Six Path Part 14, and if you did enjoy this video, give this video a like, and if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more crossover pictures with a twist. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 23. Training has begun. This is unbelievable. Urahara nodded sadly as he and his longtime friend, Yoruichi, peered at the comatose bodies of Ichigo, Orihime, and Chad, as well as their associates, Rias and her friends. All of them had bandages on various portions of their bodies, but Ichigo, being the powerhouse that he is, had the most. The two Shinigami glanced at their much younger companions' lifeless bodies until they shifted their attention to the only one who is alive and can tell them what occurred. Argento, the blonde healer from Rias's crew. Asia. Yoruichi replied soothingly, trying not to offend or damage the girl's sentiments. Can you please tell us what happened to all of you? Instead of an immediate response, she got the girl shaking her body forward and backward while pulling her knees close to her chest with wide eyes and a fearful expression. The ordeal has certainly devastated the poor girl. Yoruichi took a different tactic, wrapping her arms around the trembling girl and pulling her very close to her body to calm her down. It didn't take long for the trembling to stop. Asia. The girl said as she felt Yoruichi's arms tighten around her. Sweetie, can you tell us what happened to you and the others? Yoruichi inquired, soothingly. Okay, a horrified Asia said. Well, it all began when Ichigo transformed into his Bankai thingy. Another flashback begins, Getsuga Tensho, exclaimed the Bankai-clad Ichigo as he swung his sword, releasing the unmistakable black wave that pushed the throng of terrified shinobi away from his terrified teammates. After evading the assault, the mad Hidan yelled as he charged at the Shinigami with his ready scythe. Ichigo, on the other hand, saw the strike coming and deflected it in time to knock Hidan away before springing back to avoid a lightning bolt that split the building behind him in half. Ichigo grunted as he landed on top of a car, just as Kakuzu, Hidan, and the Kunichi formed a semicircle with their hands in various signs. So, who wants to get hurt first? Questioned a solemn Ichigo, his body radiating a black aura. The only one who's going to get hurt here is you, Shizuka exclaimed before charging towards him, her fists wrapped in wind chakra. Nadeshiko style, gale force, says the narrator. Ichigo planned to deflect the impending assault, but stepped out of the automobile as Shizuka's fist slammed with it. Ichigo's eyes widened in midair when the car was crushed by the clearly destructive power behind the move. She's a wind-style user like Naruto, only weaker. He's seen the power of Naruto's wind-style ninjutsu personally during their sparring, thus comparing the girl's elemental ninjutsu to Naruto's. There is no competition in his perspective. Shizuka inquired after hearing Ichigo's words, less powerful you say? She quickly produced a series of hand seals before spinning her wind chakra-coated arms counter-clockwise. Wind style, heaven twin dragons, says the wind.
Ichigo was being driven by a dual dragon-shaped tornado with his blade holding it back, despite the fact that he feels himself being pushed back. Ichigo was about to release another Getsuga Tensho after pressing his feet into the concrete roadway for additional friction when he noticed the other shinobi lined up next to Shizuka, all with their hands formed in a sign except Hidan.
Crap, said Ichigo, mockingly, lightning style, false darkness. Lightning style. Stream. Streams of lightning erupted from the three shinobi's palms as they thrust their arms, engulfing the dragon-shaped tornado and amplifying its devastating force.
Ichigo's footing lost the steady friction and he was violently forced back across the street before colliding with a massive red semi-truck, no matter how much he hung on and withstood the attack with his blade. The impact, along with the elemental attacks, ignited the gas within the vehicle, resulting in a large explosion and an equal-sized smoke cloud.
Ha! This guy is nothing compared to us, said Hidan as the crackle of the flames surged from their fiery source. Hidan grasped his scythe as the flames began to swirl around the shattered truck when he noticed the others staring at it. What's going on right now? His quiet response was a powerful burst of wind that drove out the flames, revealing a very alive and not fried Ichigo with the black aura streaming from his shoulders. His coat, on the other hand, was not spared, as the upper left torso and arm sleeve were gone, and the frayed ends are even raggeder than before. He's strong, Karui said, gripping her blade before sunshining behind Ichigo and swinging her sword, only to hit nothing but air. And fast. Karui looked up when the sky went dark for a brief second to see the big black wave from earlier crashing down on her, which didn't hit her after she sunshined back to her fellow shinobi. The blast landed on the Kunichi, completely obliterating the burning truck and the surrounding cars and left a massive crater in its wake. Kakuzu annoyed the kunoichi by rolling his eyes. Idiot. Hey. Who are you calling an idiot? An irritated Karui retorted, a tick mark on her brow. Exactly my point, the immortal Shinobi said, not looking at the enraged Karui who was being held back by Shizuka while cursing. Besides, I think our friend has a different side. Before any of them could respond to what he had just said, a loud and massive force crashed on the concrete in front of them, and it was the Shinigami, who was on one knee with his body quivering and his head bent, so they couldn't see his face. And no. Not this time. No, were Ichigo's last words before a crazed chuckle left his lips. Oh Ichigo. The group of ninja, including Kakuzu, were alarmed when they heard the definitely different voice. I have to be the one to show these clowns how to really fight, just like in Soul Society. Samui shivered slightly. What's with that creepy voice? She was taken off guard as a black sword saturated in her blood cut through her torso, specifically in the valley of her cleavage. As the light dimmed in her eyes, all she saw were her fellow shinobi's surprised expressions before hearing two familiar yet terrifying words from behind her. Getsuga Tensho. Flashback concludes, he was so terrifying, and so ruthless, Asia began to cry before being held again by Yoruichi to calm her. It was like he was a completely different person. Urahara leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, and let out a loud sigh. The hollow did, in fact, take control of Ichigo earlier. Traces of the dark spiritual pressure were everywhere, and the carnage itself was horrific, he said before turning to face the girl. What else happened, Asia? Kazuki. The man shivered in response to Yoruichi's menacing stare. I believe Asia is done for the time being, she needs to rest. Urahara sighed and nodded his consent. After getting close to Asia and Yoruichi, he dropped down on one knee and said, of course. Sorry, Asia. I can be a little unconcerned about other people's well-being at times. Yoruichi scoffed, raising an indignant eyebrow. A little? What? I'm just a handsome shopkeeper with employees and a hot female friend. Ignoring the female Shinigamis ranting about him being an annoying moron, he chose to ask Asia once more, but this time in a calming tone. Asia, could you please tell us what happened after Ichigo's unfortunate takeover? Asia nodded, her face drawn away from the safety of Yoruichi's chest, after wiping away her tears and breathing carefully to calm herself. Well. Another flashback begins. Asia, Orihime, and the others looked on in horror as one of the Kunoichi was destroyed by the hollow-possessed Ichigo's upgraded Getsuga Tensho. Samui. Karui exclaimed in despair and disbelief before becoming enraged. Before charging at the insane Shinigami, she drew her lightning-covered white katana. You cretin. Wait, Karui, he's drawing you in. Shizuka's words ring hollow as Karui swung her blade at the frenzied Ichigo when he was in range. Despite the heightened sharpness of the lightning chakra, the sword's blade shattered in two as Ichigo merely blocked it with a downward parry and hit Karui in the stomach. Shizuka last saw Karui being catapulted across the street, falling through a row of buildings before stopping at a burger shop that blew up on impact. Whistle that was gnarly and cruel, Hidan said, his palm on his brow, trying to gauge how far the girl was thrown. He then gazed at the gleeful hollow Ichigo before spreading an equally psychotic grin across his lips. I like this side of you. I'm going to enjoy sacrificing you to Jashin. Screw you and your Jashin, says the narrator. Hidan's world appeared to halt as he turned his head to the side. What was that? The Shinigami raised his fist and flipped him off with the bird in the middle. I didn't hear that last statement. Screw you and your Jashin, hollow Ichigo drawled, speaking to a youngster like an adult would. Did you hear that, you sorry excuse of a killer? As expected, the bloodthirsty shinobi charged at the Shinigami and struck with his scythe, which was intercepted by the insane hollow's blade, resulting in a sword and scythe duel. Hidan adjusted his scythe to the right after recognizing they had reached a stalemate, leaving the possessed Ichigo susceptible to a swift kick to the stomach. Hidan returned to his comrades for backup after seeing his opponent slump into the wall, appearing stunned, only to find Shizuka present. Hey! Where the hell is Kakuzu? Shizuka shrugged his shoulders. Forget about that jerk. I'll handle this guy myself. Really? Hidan's eyes widened as he felt a hand on his head before tasting the concrete ground against his will. When you leave yourself wide open, joked Ichigo, lifting Hidan up with his occupied arm and cut his chest with a forceful blow before kicking him away through another building that fell from the immense force. Pathetic. A large spatter of blood shot from his torso as soon as he shouted those words. Instead of reacting with a shocked expression, the hollow-possessed Ichigo calmly touched his chest with his palm before licking the blood off his fingertips and smiling sickeningly. Gross, Shizuka said, hovering over the deranged Ichigo and delivering a wind chakra-coated axe kick. The strike was deflected by the hollow-possessed Ichigo's blade, forcing the ground beneath to crack from the impact of the colliding forces. The blade, however, showed no evidence of cracking or breaking. Hollow Ichigo delivered another fast kick to the gut, causing the stunned Kunichi to automatically crash her body against a brown truck, severely indenting the side door. Hollow Ichigo shunpoed in front of Shizuka and rapidly delivered a thrust through her chest before she could restore her feet or her bearings. Shizuka's eyes widened in pain and horror, and she spat out a small amount of blood. Gah. HMPH. The possessed Shinigami seemed dissatisfied in his tone. "Somehow I missed your heart and lungs," he said as he removed his sword from the woman's breast, eliciting a pained groan before gently pressing the tip of the blade against her brow. "I'm not going to waste this opportunity." His arm went limp just as he was about to launch the attack after a thin spray of blood sprayed from his shoulder. His response came from behind him in the sound of a barking shinobi, to his rarely astonished and confused appearance at what had just happened. Feeling a little numb there, the hollow-possessed Ichigo whirled around to discover the obnoxious Hidan still alive and well, a retractable tiny spear driven into his left shoulder. However, he is surrounded by two quite distinct circumstances. The first was his black skin with white marks all over him, which gave him the look of a skeleton. The second was that he was standing in the heart of a bloody emblem. Cursed Jutsu, Dead Possession Blood. Instead of panicking, the hollow mask-clad Ichigo inquired amusingly, "Really? That sounds a little intimidating." "Sort of," Hidan asked again, this time with a tick mark. "With this technique, I can inflict any injury to my body that I want, and that same injury is transferred onto you." He showed by extracting the spear from his shoulder and making a lengthy cut on his right forearm, leading hollow Ichigo to look at his left forearm and see the identical wound. Soon, he felt pain coursing through his body as blood splashed from all places of his body as a frantic Hidan repeatedly stabbed him. "Once this jutsu is activated, there is no getting away from me, you are at my mercy." Hollow Ichigo began to chuckle, his head down enough to prevent the others from seeing his face. That giggle turned into slow laughing, and then into the classic maniacal laughter for which the hollow is famous. "Oh, that's rich right there. Me at your mercy," the possessed Shinigami exclaimed, finally calming himself with a knowing smirk. "However, I see a flaw in your jutsu." "Oh, and what's that?" Hidan mocked as hollow Ichigo pointed his sword's blade at the ground. His face was covered in a psychotic grin. "You need to be inside that circle of yours." He stabbed his sword into the concrete ground, unleashing a tremendous Getsuga Tensho throughout the concrete ground, including Hidan's location.
"No," Hidan exclaimed, his gaze drawn to the spear oozing with his opponent's blood. He then prepared to stab himself in the chest, near the heart. "Die, bastard, your attack won't reach my circle before I—"
"Before you what?" The possessed Shinigami mocked behind Hidan, gripping Hidan's occupied arm with his free arm. "Before you lose?" he asked, looking down at the circle, forcing the shinobi to do the same. When he noticed his opponent's foot smudging the circle, it broke the technique, as indicated by his skin returning to its natural color. The terror inside Hidan deepened as mask-clad Ichigo repeatedly stabbed him in the back before pinning him in position as one of the Getsuga Tensho blasts engulfed them, wrecking the streets even more. Despite the tattered Bankai robe and burn marks on his torso, hollow Ichigo was totally fine after the smoke from the other blasts dispersed. His opponent, on the other hand, had a different experience. A very irritated Hidan is still being held in his palm, his body terribly burned and missing a leg and an arm, the ligaments of which are gushing profusely from their sockets. "Damn you!" He spat blood while attempting to escape his grip, and when that failed, he attempted to sever his head, which was halted by hollow Ichigo's blade. "Goodbye." The mask-wearing Shinigami stabbed Hidan in the back again, this time precisely where the heart was. "Gestuga Tensho." He yelled as another strong burst of his characteristic technique surrounded his immortal opponent, but this Getsuga was different. The explosion was white with a pale red outline, and it completely destroyed the entire block, with nearby buildings reduced to rubble. Gallons of water poured from the shattered pipes like a park fountain. Countless cables swayed as lightning sparks crackled through the sound barrier.
Hollow Ichigo lowered his left arm, which had once held his opponent, and looked to his left side, where he discovered Shizuka sitting against an undamaged automobile, her eyes filled with shock and fear.
"Now that he's gone, it's just you and me," he teased as he began to approach towards the terrified Kunoichi, only to stop on his third step. "How long are the two of you going to wait there?" Hollow Ichigo turned around to see that Kakuzu guy who had departed early in the war and Karui, the lightning kunoichi he had hurled through a series of buildings, her shredded clothing and bloodied cheeks visible. "Tell us where Uzumaki is, and we'll let your friends live." Kakuzu and Karui snapped their fingers. A swirl of smoke formed behind them before being cleared by a blast of wind, revealing Chad, Orihime, Rias, and her pals all covered in deep gashes and black bruises all over their bodies and faces. For the time being. Rather than pleading or demanding their release, the possessed Shinigami simply laughed at them and said, "Kill them for all I care." Ichigo? Orihime sobbed, tears welling up in her eyes, as Chad and the demon teenagers gasped. Karui was astonished as well, but her rage overcame her surprise and she pointed her blade at Orihime's throat, much to the chagrin of the teen and her friends. "Tell us where Uzumaki is, and we will kill them all, starting with her. And, as I previously stated, kill them for all I care." He came to a halt with a loud grunt, grasping his face with his free hand. "No. What are you doing?" His sword-wielding arm flailed around as he staggered on the pavement. "You don't need them. You don't need her. No, no." Everyone watched as the Shinigami grasped the mask and yanked it off his face, accompanied by a loud anguished scream for the possessor. After a few moments, the orange-haired Shinigami raised his head and revealed the familiar face that Orihime and Chad recognized. "Ichigo," said Orihime, relieved that her crush was free of whatever had seized him. "Oh, Orihime. See Chad." "I'm sorry," Ichigo said as he dropped to the ground with a loud thud, and blood slowly poured from the wounds Hidan had inflicted on him with his curse jutsu. Kakuzu sighed, slightly irritated. "Great, now we have no idea where our target is, and the only person who knows has just died on us. What should we do then?" Shizuka wondered as she limped her way up to Kakuzu, glancing at the hostages. "I vote that we kill them and send a message to Uzumaki." Before any of her colleagues could agree or dispute, the black gateway of the Shinju's design unexpectedly opened behind them. "What's going on? Why is the portal open? Did one of you open it?" Karui asked, her sword still pointing at a terrified Orihime. "No," the immortal shinobi said before falling silent. The kunoichi observed him as he nodded every 5 seconds, as if he were having a discussion with someone. Kakuzu turned to face the female ninja with a final nod. "It's time for me to go."
"What? Why?" exclaimed both enraged kunoichi. "Because the Shinju declares it." With that, the kunoichi unwillingly walked inside the portal, irritated and angry expressions directed towards the hostages. Kakuzu turned back as he was going to accompany them inside and delivered a message to them. "Tell Uzumaki that we will return for his head and for you all. You don't know when, but we will return to this world."
With that, Kakuzu entered the dark portal, leaving behind the now comatose youths who had passed out from the blood and a barely conscious Asia who was crawling slowly to the presumably dead and no longer possessed Ichigo. Don't die on us, Ichigo," the former nun whispered weakly before a blinding light from her silver ring surrounded Ichigo. The serious wounds and blood on his body began to fade as time passed. However, Asia slumped to the floor next to Ichigo after spending whatever she had left. Flashback concludes. The portal closed soon after they left, which is when you and Yoruichi found us and brought us back here. The two elderly Shinigami nodded, their eyes earnest but frightened on one another. Yoruichi rose up, Asia still in her arms, and exited the room, saying, "Let's get some hot chocolate in you, Asia." "Oh, okay." Kazuki returned to the unconscious bodies of the adolescents after a little time of stillness, his countenance solemn. "Things are about to get worse from here on out," he said, looking out the window at the full moon. "Perhaps it's time we all moved past our differences." After 3 days, Ryozanpaka Dojo Naruto stood up from his previous position and stretched his back to relieve the stiffness that had gathered overnight, expecting a wonderful morning after a good night's sleep. "All right then," the shinobi exclaimed, standing up to shake the stiffness off his body. "My Furinji-style training starts today." Originally, the elder planned to train him the day after they arrived, but a messenger bird abruptly summoned him to an important matter that demanded his whole attention. Fortunately for the elder and especially Naruto, the situation was located on the outskirts of Tokyo, and the elder anticipated that it would take no more than 3 days to resolve. Those 3 days have now passed. "You're excited, I see," Ashura said, snorting as Naruto shyly wiped his head after his momentary exhilaration. "That's nothing to be ashamed of, Naruto. I remember my father's ninshu training days, when I was always eager to learn new techniques and the philosophy behind them. I distinctly remember you being overshadowed by your genius brother, Indra, every step of the way over the years." Kurama and Naruto both chuckled as Ashura complained about his older brother grabbing the spotlight when they were kids. "Do you still hold a grudge?" a smirking Kurama with a fanged grin said. However, if I recall correctly, while Ashura struggled throughout his life, He made friends who helped him and had loyal followers by the time he awakened his own power through hard work. That reminds me of you as well, Kurama joked, yawning loudly enough to irritate his companion. You really are Ashura's reincarnation, after all. I suppose so, he said as he heard a knock on the door. Come on in. The wooden sliding door opened, revealing Mui in the same attire he had seen her in the day before. Good morning, Naruto, says the narrator. Good morning, Mui. Naruto smiled at the girl, who returned his smile. Did you just happen to wake up? Mui shook her head, her smile remaining on her face. No way. I've been awake since 4 a.m. Since 4? Naruto asked, looking at his watch, which read 8:15 a.m. Do you normally get up at that hour? Yep. Kenichi gets up at that time as well for training, Mui said as her fellow blonde put his headband around his forehead after removing it to sleep blissfully. Naruto was astonished to learn of the tiny and cowardly man's early training. Really? How long has he been training at the dojo?
About 3 months today, actually. Let's walk to the main house. Naruto shrugged as he closed the door and walked out of the building with Mui. As they approached the outer training fields, Mui looked to her blonde counterpart and asked, So, how long have you studied martial arts?
Naruto began, trying to think of an excuse but failing. As a result, he told the truth. I'm fairly skilled at hand-to-hand combat, but this is my first experience with formal martial arts training. Really? Mui was surprised as she looked at the bashful blonde. Either you're very skilled in hand-to-hand combat or you have great potential to persuade my grandfather to train you. He doesn't teach just anyone. Except me because I'm his granddaughter. Then there's Kenichi, who was defeated by his old friend, Ryoto, so my grandfather took him to the woods for special training. No kidding? You gotta tell me more about Kenichi. I didn't really take him as a fighter. Did he get into a lot of fights and did he win all of them? Naruto inquired, noting that the brown-haired lad did not appear to be a fighter at first impression. The female blonde laughed slightly. Yeah, and while he has won the majority of them, he really doesn't fight unless he has no choice or someone he cares about is in danger. Sounds like he and I are cut from the same cloth. The blonde couple then walked in comfortable silence until Naruto realized he had forgotten something or someone. Oh no, we forgot to wake Ria up. Mui calmed the boy by waving her hand. She woke up half an hour before you, so she's been helping me cook breakfast, which is where we're going now. She knows because Ria has been sharing Mui's room with Naruto for the length of his training. Sweet. I'm starving, Mui said in response to Naruto's delight. Your food is the best I've ever had. Except for ramen, of course. After recovering from the shock of Naruto and Rei's arrival, the entire Ryozanpaka family welcomed their new guests with excellent meal prepared by Mui, but no ramen. Mui whispered beneath her breath, boys. He also remembered the masters introducing themselves and their skill of several martial art forms, but their personalities were completely different. The only thing they have in common is their odd conduct and a desire to train Kenichi. As they entered the main home after leaving their shoes outside, Mui led Naruto to the living room, where the masters, Kenichi, and Ria were evidently waiting for them because Apachai's head was on the food-covered table, all bewildered from starvation. Have you guys been waiting for us this whole time? Naruto inquired, before receiving a sheepish nod from the elder and wiping his chin. Sorry about that. Instead of reprimanding his new disciple, the elder grinned as he motioned for Naruto and Mui to take their places so they could all eat, which they gladly did. That's fine. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them and grow stronger than before. He then grinned just as Naruto was about to eat his meal. However, if you make any mistakes during your training, it will be 100 times harder than it was before. Sure. The boy gulped uncomfortably before taking his first bite, as did everyone else, except Kenichi. Why? Because his meal is currently being devoured by 3 of the male masters. The child is becoming depressed while attempting to repel them. Ria, on his right, laughed as the disturbance continued. If this happens every day, this is a pretty lively house.
Yeah, Naruto said, looking at each of the masters, beginning with the towering and tanned man. Apachai Hopachi, the death god of Muay Thai, and Muay Thai master. His gaze shifted to the leather jacket-wearing man, Shio Sakari, master of all karate styles and nicknamed, the 100th degree street fighter. Is that some kind of rank in this street fighting, or something?
You got a problem or something? Naruto was apparently caught looking at him. None at all, the blonde ninja said defensively, which worked as the brute karate master began eating from Kenichi's platter of food. He mumbled under his breath, drunken bum. Wimp. Shut it, fox. He returned his focus to the shorter man. Kensai Ma, master of all Chinese martial arts and this world's version of pervy sage. Do the other worlds have their own versions of pervy sage? He then turned to face the hakama-clad man who was staring at him. A Kisame, master of all forms of jujitsu and known as the philosophical jujitsu master, he said, eventually settling on the dojo's last master. Shigur Kasaka, the mistress of weaponry, and master of all weapons. His train of thinking was interrupted when he felt a presence near him or his food. Naruto lunged out with his chopsticks in his left hand, preventing a foreign, bandaged hand from reaching his supper. Hey! The kid got skills, Sakari grumbled before withdrawing his hand from the staring younger blonde. That's incredible. Perhaps he'll train with Apachai in Muay Thai. Naruto figures the giant of a man wants to train him as well, but the elder has already claimed him as his disciple. Before he knew it, Naruto was successfully defending his food from the greedy vultures Sakari, Apachai, and Kensai, much to the amazement of the masters except the elder, who already knew his disciple's skills. He's already starting to fit in, the elder joked as Mui smiled at him. I have a feeling this dojo will become even more lively than before. Mui laughed before turning to face Ria, catching her glancing at Naruto for a second before looking away, just like Naruto did. Mui's face turned cunning as she watched Naruto and Ria engage in a cat-and-mouse game of staring at each other. It's definitely livelier. Naruto had a distant face as he chewed on the meal Mui had prepared for him and everyone else. I wonder how Ichigo and the others are doing back in Karakura Town, and I hope my clone is doing well. Karakura Town, Urahara's shop, seriously. And all of that happened 4 days ago. The clone inquired of Ichigo, who stood in front of him. Shinigami with orange hair gave a strong nod. Yes. When the clone arrived in the shop's living quarters using flying Raijin jutsu, he was surprised to see everyone still unconscious with bandages covering sections of their bodies and wanted to know what occurred following his boss's departure from town. Instead of Kazuki and Yoruichi, he was briefed about the events that occurred after the original Naruto left for his formal martial arts training by Ichigo and Asia. Damn it, the boss will be furious when he finds out about this. Asia raised an inquisitive brow. At us? No, he'll be pissed at himself for not being here to help you guys with Kakuzu and the others, the clone said, noticing Ichigo's determined stare. Oh, I like the way you're looking right now, are you ready? Ichigo nodded firmly. More than ready. Good. We'll start in 30 minutes, Clone Naruto said, looking at Asia, who still had a bandage wrapped around her head. Asia must be saving her strength for a later time, given how low her spirit energy is. Asia. The small girl said, looking at him. Please convey my condolences to Rias and the others. Hi. A half hour later, 30 minutes had passed, and the clone and Ichigo were set to begin the latter's second day of hollow control training. So, what do we do now? I don't want to go through that meditation crap again, Ichigo said forcefully, his fists clenched. Is there an alternative? As he crossed his arms, the clone sighed deeply. There is another option. What exactly is it? Well, it includes direct contact with your inner hollow, Ichigo was about to say, but the clone put up his hand to stop him. Before you complain like the girl you were, you should know the difference between using another being's power. Ichigo's arched brow indicated that he had his attention. Tell me, Ichigo, from what Urahara and Yoruichi have told me, you and the Shinigami can communicate with your Zanpakuto spirits in your mindscape, correct? Yeah, Ichigo said, recalling the first time he met Zangetsu. It was time to reclaim his Shinigami powers, which were essentially his own and were stored deep within his soul. Was there ever a time when you met or spoke with your inner hollow? Remember, this is important so I know where you stand in your training. Ichigo thought about it for almost 5 minutes before remembering. Oh. I remember meeting it during my fight with Kenpachi in Soul Society, he remarked casually, before feeling goosebumps run down his spine. That man was insane. I never want to fight him again. The dude sounds like quite a guy, the clone observed dryly before returning to his work. You've already made contact with your Zanpakuto spirit in your inner hollow, which is good. I believe you can control your hollow powers, but it won't be easy. Ichigo snorted and leaned against Zangetsu. With our way of life, nothing is ever easy.
True, shrugged clone Naruto as he sat down with his legs crossed, pointing to a spot in front of him. Sit.
Why? Don't argue with me, just do it already.
TCCH, Ichigo said before sitting in front of the clone with his fist raised. What? Clone Naruto shook his fist, instructing him to pump his fist. Why would I do something like that?
Would you please stop asking questions and just do what I say? Hey, if you went through Urahara's training like I did, you'd understand why I'm wary. Being a clone possessing the memories of the original Naruto, the clone remembered a chat with Ichigo's training to reclaim his Shinigami powers. The training entailed the orange-haired youngster being beaten by Ururu, having his soul chain torn by Tessai, and spending nearly 2 days in a deep pit to avoid becoming a hollow himself. It wasn't until he encountered Zangetsu, his Zanpakuto ghost, that he regained his powers.
Quote, I see your point, the clone said, shaking his head and keeping his raised arm up. But trust me on this, I wouldn't do it if I knew it wasn't going to work. He remained seated on the ground as he waited for his companion to do the same. It wasn't long before Ichigo squatted in front of him, raising his fist reluctantly before bumping into his fist. All right, now simply close your eyes and meditate to enter your mindscape.
Ichigo sat there, watching the clone close his eyes before closing his own. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on the side of a glass, tall structure that seemed to reach the blue sky. In fact, he was surrounded by boundless tall towers under the blue sky. Despite the building's current location, he sat up and noticed a familiar blonde person running to him. It actually worked? Ichigo inquired, amazed. You're here? I know, huh? I can't believe it actually worked myself. Ignoring his friend's shocked expression, clone Naruto peered about. Why are there so many buildings in your mind? He was astonished when Ichigo grabbed his arms and shook him about like a doll. You couldn't believe it worked yourself. Ichigo said angrily. That means you didn't expect this to work at all. A different voice attracted their attention before the clone could respond or punch him. Who is this, Ichigo? Ichigo said, looking behind clone Naruto, who turned around to see a tall man with long black hair, high cheekbones, and a shaved beard with a mustache. He wore a black cloak with torn ends and a pair of stylish sunglasses. Zangetsu, Ichigo murmured before releasing the clone. I sensed a disturbance in your mind and came to investigate, the towering, commanding spirit said to the blonde lad standing behind his partner. I'm assuming he's the source of the problem. Sorry for intruding, but I'm training Ichigo to control the hollow in him for our next battle against the Arancars, the clone said, giving a peace sign. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Zangetsu. I wish I could say the same thing. Clone Naruto's grin stretched slightly as the spirit gazed at his shocked master. We could do just fine on our own. Ichigo's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at his spirit. Zangetsu. Naruto here understands the situation I'm in. In fact, he has a being inside of him, and they work together just like you and I do. Ha 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 ha. You're so pathetic. You ask for my help to control me? The air became heavy as the ground rocked due to an unseen power. Clone Naruto, Ichigo, and Zangetsu noticed an exact clone of Ichigo except his eyes are yellow, his hair and body are pale white, and his Shinigami robes are similarly white, as contrast to Ichigo's black ropes. Finally, he had a crazy grin on his face, as opposed to Ichigo's serene demeanor. I'm guessing he's the hollow, and man, he's ugly.
The hollow cackled loudly to get their attention before Ichigo could respond. I want to fight you again, Ichigo, he said, raising his right open hand in the air in front of his two buddies. Spirit energy began to build up in his hands before it shined brightly and revealed itself to be an exact replica of Ichigo's Zanpakuto. The only difference, like the others, was that the blade was white with a black edge and the handle was wrapped in black wrappings.
Whatever. It's 3 against 1, so this will be easy. When Ichigo turned around, he was surprised to discover both his Zanpakuto spirit and partner in training standing on the rooftop of a building far distant from his current location. Hey! What the hell are you two doing there? Before speaking, clone Naruto clasped his mouth. We're supporting you from here, Ichigo. Way out here. Why that blondie? Murmured Ichigo before immediately raising his blade to deflect an impending cut from the inner hollow. Hey, I wasn't ready. Do I appear to care? Shit. 12 p.m., Ryozanpaka Dojo, Tokyo. Master. I just want you to know that I deeply regret this right now, Naruto muttered hesitantly as he tugged on his Konoha headband before looking at his training clothing that the elder had loaned him for the training. He was dressed in the same white Dougie attire that Kenichi wears for his training sessions with the other masters. Come on, my disciple, don't be that way. The Jinchuriki swallowed uncomfortably as he observed his new martial arts master swinging 2 huge wood logs with handmade handles many times as though warming up. The Ryozanpaka masters sat on the side of the dojo, still reeling from the news that the elder had taken on another disciple after training Kenichi in the Dark Valley in all the years they'd known him, especially the Hakama-adorned guy. Ria was also present, sitting close to Apachai, the tall giant. They don't want to miss out on the elder's training tactics while torturing disciples. Kenichi and Mui were the only ones who were not present because they had departed after breakfast to attend a local high school in the vicinity because it was Friday. Here I come, says the narrator. Whoa, said Naruto as he ducked beneath one post before leaping back to avoid the other.
The elder swung his batons around, one of them aimed for Naruto. Listen up, Naruto, I'm about to start teaching you one of my style's techniques, made it to his ears. But you must train 10 times as hard in order to learn the next technique. Instead of a jubilant yell, he heard a grunt of, "Aw, man. Now listen here, the technique I'm about to teach you is also one of my legendary 108 techniques."
Legendary 108 techniques? Naruto asked, amazed. So, what is the purpose of this technique, and am I going to learn them all? The elder chose to respond to the first question while dismissing the last, saying, "It's quite simple actually." The elder attacked his disciple with his wooden stump, batons, who avoided many times, but not in the way the elderly man expected. "Just stay calm, Naruto." After landing from a backflip and deadpanning at his master, Naruto stated as he pointed a finger at him, "Kind of hard to do with those weapons of mass destruction in your hands." "This is to help you learn this technique," the blonde adolescent said, crossing his arms, causing the elderly guy to groan. "Perhaps you'd like a demonstration?" The elder grinned as he set the stumps next to him, receiving a nod from his young apprentice. "Alright, then. I want you to attack me." Naruto just stood there blinking owlishly before breaking into a grin as he heard it. "If you say so," he said, slipping into a fighting stance unknown and intriguing to the masters. Naruto charged towards him with amazing speed, giving the elder no time to defend himself. "Here I come," says the narrator.
As he approached the elder, Naruto unleashed a punch targeted at his face, only to have his fist deflected to the side, hard. In fact, the power was so strong that it caused him to lose his feet, forcing him to perform a single handstand to steady himself before pushing himself back to a safe distance from the elder.
Impressive speed, and he managed to regain his footing quickly against someone like the elder, Akisame said, placing his palm under his chin, a twitch that normally indicates that something noteworthy had piqued his interest. Kensai, who was sitting to Akisame's left, nodded in accord. "He has a lot of potential. Do you think he'll be able to survive the elder's training?" "The old man wouldn't train him if he didn't see what he's capable of," Sakari said as he drank from his beer jug. "How long until he gives up?" "Aren't you enthusiastic?" Kensai asked cynically before breaking into a grin. "I'm going to give him a week." After today's training session, as the elder's powerful-looking arms blocked and deflected Naruto's assault of forceful punches and kicks, the jujitsu master grumbled at the smirking karate and Chinese kenpo teachers. This continued on for an hour, much to the chagrin and amazement of Jinchuriki.
"I haven't landed a hit at all." Naruto rushed back to create some distance between himself and the elder, who was still waving his arms in an optimum rhythm around him. It's as if the elder must have noticed his expression since he nodded to corroborate his abrupt revelation. "You control the radius around you with your arms."
"Bravo, Naruto. Well done." The elder kept waving his arms while unveiling the shield around him, much to Naruto's surprise. "To be able to detect and deflect anything in your territory, that is known as Seikuken." "Seikuken?" inquired Naruto, noticing the invisible shield that surrounded his martial arts teacher. "It is an excellent defense technique, but it has 2 drawbacks." Like what, master?" "The first is that you must remain calm to perform this technique. Jumping around to avoid an opponent's attack is not calm." Naruto grinned sheepishly after recalling the elder's prior instruction. "The second point is that only a sufficient amount of force can penetrate it." Naruto nodded, assuring his teacher that he now understood the mechanics of the technique. "Alright, now practice the technique." "Huh?" Seeing the elder cross his arms with an expectant face, Naruto decided not to fight and instead continued with the lecture. "Alright, I have to control the radius around me while remaining calm." He took a long breath and gently exhaled as he began to move his arms in the same manner as the elder while channeling his chakra in his palms. Before they knew it, the masters, including the elder and Rias, noticed a flawlessly and clearly apparent Seikuken shield surrounding Naruto, who was as serene as normal when gathering natural energy for Sage Mode. Not only that, but his Seikuken's power was strong, as the spherical shield sunk into the earth, matching the space of the boy's controlled radius. Incredible. An hour into his training and he already has one of the legendary 108 techniques down, Kensai said, his eyes twinkling. "Perhaps if I..."
"Kensai," Akisame abruptly cut his shorter companion off. "You know as well as I do that the elder made it clear to Naruto that he is his disciple during his stay in the dojo."
"I know," Kensai said, his lips pursed, as the elder stretched his hands open and closed before grabbing his dual wooden swords, drawing the attention of everyone, including an anxious Naruto. "Poor Naruto," Rias grumbled, observing the boy's trembling but slender, muscled figure. "What I would do too." "No. Stop it. Why would I think like that? Naruto swallowed, sweating, at the sight before him. Master? What do you think you're doing? Of course, I'm going to test the strength of your Seikuken, exclaimed the elder. With that response from one of the most insane and physically powerful people Naruto has ever met, he simply said one word that represented how he is presently feeling. Shit. Later in the afternoon, Urahara's shop Karakura town. Well, that was quite something, wasn't it? A beaming clone Naruto inquired of a bashed and plainly injured Ichigo in front of him. As another Naruto clone tends to and bandages Ichigo, he lets forth a boiling howl. Screw you. You're welcome, the doppelganger chuckled before picking up a towel next to him and throwing it at Ichigo, who grabbed it quickly despite his injuries. At the very least, you showed your inner hollow who's boss. Ichigo beat his inner hollow after 3 hours of battle by letting the maniac stab him in the waist and grabbing his blade before stabbing it into the white Ichigo clone. Clone Naruto crossed his arms thoughtfully, but still. Ichigo arched an inquiring brow as he wiped the blood from the wound above his eye. Still, what? I don't think you can use the hollow's full power this way. This astonished Ichigo, who was about to argue, but the clone uncrossed his arms to lift one of them in the universal cool down sign, which helped, if only for a moment, soothe the former. You subjugated him in order to control his power, but you and he are not cooperating. The two of you are not working as a team. A team? As in me and that hollow being partners? Ichigo exclaimed, surprised. Yeah, right. Like that's going to happen. After crossing his arms again, the blonde clone ninja sighed. Listen carefully, Strawberry. You won't reach your full potential with the hollow's power through subjugation. You're doing the same thing the boss did with Kurama back then. With a thank you nod to the clone who had attended to his wounds, Ichigo addressed the inevitable inquiry. Who the hell is Kurama? He wondered, tugging at the bandages that clung to his torso and waist. He's the creature within the boss, his partner, the clone replied casually. Long ago, during a huge battle in our home world, the boss decided to embrace his identity as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, as the fox had been commonly known for centuries. He fought and beat the beast in an epic showdown, subjugating him and taking control of his power. Ichigo nodded slightly, indicating that he understands the new information. So, what happened next? During one of the most intense and brutal battles the boss had ever fought, he learned from one of the Nine-Tails brethren, Son Goku, that the fox's true name is Kurama. However, despite knowing his name, Kurama wouldn't help the boss unless he kept his promises through his actions, which he did. Afterwards, Kurama offered his chakra to the boss, who happily accepted while releasing him from cage inside. Wow. Ichigo mumbled in amazement before speaking normally. So, the real Naruto and Kurama, are partners and best friends. The clone stroked the back of his neck. Well, they bicker and get on each other's nerves sometimes, but that's how partners are sometimes, the blonde ninja clone explained, his carefree expression replaced with a somber one. If I used Kurama's power against your hollow power as it is now, you might be able to land a clean hit on both me and the boss. So, I have to be friendly with the hollow inside him. How the hell am I supposed to do that? A dissatisfied Ichigo wondered as the clone shrugged his shoulders and vanished in a puff of smoke while stating his final words.
Heck, if I know. Hearing that, Ichigo let out a deep sigh as he considered Naruto's clone's remarks about being partners. After a few moments of thought, the Shinigami slowly went out of the training room, a little limp in his stride, till he arrived at the room where his friends were resting, only to discover Orihime and Chad sitting and drinking tea.
However, Rias and her party were nowhere to be found in the room. If you're wondering where Rias and her friends are, Ichigo turned slowly around to face Urahara and Yoruichi, who were standing at the doorway. They left while you and Naruto's clone were doing whatever you two were doing after regaining consciousness and being healed by the cute Asia. Did they say where they were going? The older Shinigami said, shaking his head. Great, he replied before feeling arms wrapped tightly around him. Hey, who? Ichigo. Recognizing the voice, the bandaged orange-haired adolescent turned around in his arms to see a delighted and teary-eyed Orihime, as Chad gave a thumbs up. I'm so glad you're safe. Ichigo answered by wrapping his arms around Orihime's waist, much to the girl's humiliation, Kazuki's jealous Chargin, and Yoruichi's amusement. Me, too, Orihime. Me, too. Afternoon, Ryozanpaka Dojo, Tokyo. Oh. My. God, both Kenichi and Mui exclaimed simultaneously as they opened the wooden doors to reveal many small craters with spider web-like fissures at the edges scattered across the dojo's compound. They had just returned from school, Mui carrying a few grocery bags and Kenichi carrying the rest of them inside the enormous, heavy-looking bag. Ah. Kenichi and Mui searched for the source of the cry until they turned their heads up to the sky, only to witness a body slam on the ground with a loud thud. When they heard it, both adolescents cringed until they were surprised when the body turned out to be Naruto, whose eyes were whirling and saying, "Mommy, the unicorns." "Geez. Naruto, are you alright?" Kenichi inquired as he and Mui dashed up to the blonde, who had swiftly recovered consciousness. "What exactly happened here?" Naruto rubbed his chin and pointed to the skies, where he saw a familiar figure before landing on the ground in front of them. "He's what happened, Mui. That monster of a grandfather of yours." He noticed the girl smile uneasily, while Kenichi maintained a deadpan expression. "Oh," the elder said, childishly. "That's hurtful, Naruto," Kenichi said as Naruto helped him to his feet. "Putting that aside, your Seikuken skill is impressive for someone taking formal marital art training for the first time." Mui and Kenichi were both taken aback when they heard the elder's words. "Really? That's fantastic. Well done, Naruto." "Thanks, Mui." As she moved to the main house, the blonde beauty nodded. "I had better get started on dinner, Kenichi." "Hi." Naruto chuckled at Kenichi, who chased her down like a dog would a mailman. "Someone has a crush on someone," he murmured, and a sudden powerful pressure assaulted his senses, forcing him to view the elder with a frightening expression. Was it something I said?" a nervous and sweating Naruto inquired. A symphony of loud smashes and screams outside blasted Kenichi and Mui's eardrums as they entered the main house, but they continued strolling to the kitchen as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. When they entered the kitchen, they noticed another familiar face preparing lunch. "Ria?" an astonished Kenichi inquired. Ria, the dojo's second female visitor, was preparing exotic meals unknown to them. When she heard her name and saw them, the black-haired beauty smiled and placed a vegetable in the boiling pot with other things. "Good day, Kenichi." "Mui, how did you find school?" "It was as much fun as usual," Kenichi said. "For you it was," while Mui enthusiastically commented. Mui asked Ria the obvious question after hearing Naruto shouting harsh words outside. "Have they been doing any training since we left for school?" Ria nodded and turned down the heat on the stove. Those two had been training for 9 hours straight, not counting the 2 breaks. "Wow!" Kenichi exclaimed with awe, and Mui echoed him. "I didn't think anyone else could survive training with the elder without getting bruised or breaking bones."
Mui gazed at Kenichi with interest. "Sounds like you want to train with my grandfather again, Kenichi."
Kenichi, terrified, shook his head so violently that it appeared as if his head was ready to fall off. "No way. Based on what happened in the Dark Valley and what we just saw outside, I'm glad to be working with the other masters instead of the elder." On that note, when a strong hand seized the back of Ryozenpaku's shirt, he stiffened. He didn't need to look since he knew who it was. A Kisame Kosuji, his strictest Ryozanpaka master and the one he fears the most. "It's time for you to start training. I think it's my turn." With dazzling blazing eyes, a Kisame stated. "NNNNOOO." Kenichi screamed in terror as his master took him from the kitchen. Ria and Mui both looked towards the doorway for a moment before laughing at the boy's predicament. They resumed cooking in peaceful solitude, oblivious to the screaming outside. Mui remarked, "How long have you and Naruto been a couple?" as Ria grabbed up a nearby water bottle and began drinking it. Ria almost choked on the water in her throat before spitting it out, perplexing the blonde girl. "Was it something I said?" Ria gazed at the much younger girl while clearing her throat of any lingering water. "No, Naruto and I are not married. We're just buddies." "Oh, really?" Mui chuckled slyly at Ria, who was suddenly perplexed. "From the looks you and him secretly exchanged earlier in breakfast, I assumed you two were together." "How does it appear?" Ria inquired, her voice trembling. "Yeah. How does it appear?" The two were taken aback as they stared at the entryway, where a bruised and puzzled Naruto stood with a not-so-bruised and interested elder behind him. They must have concluded their training for the day. "It appears that dinner is ready," Ria promptly responded, displaying the prepared dish. "I'll go set up the table." Naruto took a step forward and grabbed the meal. "Let me help you with that." Naruto followed Ria to the dining room, his arms full of steaming and delicious-smelling food, after receiving a nod from the girl. Mui gazed at her grandfather, who was now licking a green lollipop, as they exited the kitchen. "How did he fare, Grandpa?" "He fared quite well, Mui." The elder spoke up. "However, he needs a little more practice staying calm in order to perform the Seikuken. But, other from that, I believe I will have to work even more to train him." "Really?" Mui, who was taken aback, inquired. "He's more skilled than me." "Both yes and no. His fighting technique is more freestyle, but he has a lot of heart and the determination to see things through." The elder grinned as he and a beaming Mui entered the dining room, where all the masters, Naruto, Ria, and Kenichi were present, the latter defending his food from the vultures, including Naruto. He will take it to new heights. Mui was perplexed when she overheard him say that. What exactly do you mean by that? There are unusual circumstances involving Naruto. Like what? Secret. The elder laughed loudly as he took his place near the table on the floor, leaving a pouting Mui behind before she joined the rest of her family for supper. He then stared at his whiskered disciple, who had just taken a fish from Kenichi's lowered plate. In the world you live in, Naruto, I have no doubt you will push the Furinji style further than I or Mui could. Make me proud, my disciple. When Naruto's and Rei's hands momentarily met, causing little flushes on their cheeks and pulling in their respective limbs to their bodies before returning to their dinner, the powerful Furinji style master grinned again. Young love these days. Mui's room, later that night. Sayo, what a day. Ria explained as she put on a purple paws printed pajama that Mui had lent her during her stay. The Titaness decided to go to bed early because the blonde girl was on the first floor of the main house, completing a late-night check of Ryo's and Paku's expenses for the month. It's unusual to witness a family as different as theirs. It reminds me of my children's wild gatherings. She was ready to lie down on her futon for some beauty rest when she was interrupted. It was a gentle noise coming from outside. What on earth is there out there? The Titaness approached the room window and opened it before putting her head out, looking for the source of the noises. She looked to the right and saw nothing. Nothing was there as she looked to her left. When she looked down, she noticed Naruto practicing moves and strikes at the building beneath her window. He doesn't know when to give up. She then heard something from him that she was not expecting to hear at all. I will protect them all. Ria blinked as she saw Naruto do a backflip in the air before landing. I will do everything I can to master the Furinji style. The silence took control. I will use ninjutsu and all of my skills to protect them, especially her. A brief hush took over once more. What's the big deal? Her body has nothing to do with it. Silence reigned supreme once more. Okay, partially. Naruto paused in his motions as he gazed at the moon, utterly unconscious of the pair of eyes watching him from behind. I don't care about that, Kurama. Ria lifted an inquisitive brow. Who's Kurama? All I care about is the safety of my Karakura town friends. Seiko and our child. Naruto answered firmly, shocking Ria before a scowl disfigured her beautiful features. She was going to shut the window when she heard the child say his final words. And Ria. She paused her current action since she was even more surprised than before. He knows he has a woman and a child waiting for him, but he also cares about me. Ria reflected as Naruto calmly practiced the motions required for the absolute defense technique in his arsenal. Why?
Naruto sighed and loosened his arms, letting go of the Seikuken. Ria, she's more beautiful and gorgeous in every way than I could have imagined. Ria, who was slightly embarrassed, noticed her heartbeat was a little faster than usual. Wait, who am I kidding? She is the Titaness, an eternal. She could never be with a person who could die at any time. And she has no intention of joining a harem. She isn't that type of person.
How does he know that? He should at least inquire if Rei's musings were interrupted by a blinking Ria tapping her head to see if something was wrong. What on earth am I thinking? I'm not going to join a harem, can I, however? No, I show no. Don't ever doubt yourself, Naruto. As Ashura's white translucent figure emerged from Naruto, Ria suppressed a gasp at this stunning occurrence. After all, you were trained by my father, who is considered a god in our world. Jinchuriki shakes his head. That has nothing to do with anything, Ashura. I shouldn't cause Ria anguish if I'm not going to be there for her. You and I both know that when the Justu's time restriction expires, I must leave this world. Jutsu, is there a time limit, and you're going to leave this world? You're now conversing with two voices in your head. What's the matter with you, Naruto? Before taking a nap, Kurama told me about what happened in the previous world. You helped and protected Seiko, her friends, and a group of survivors from flesh-eating zombies and an old enemy from your past. Following that, you and Seiko fell in love, and you are now expecting a kid. So, what's the deal with Ria if you have feelings for her? As I previously stated, Ashura, she is immortal, whereas I am not. I don't want to hurt her like.
Kronos. Ashura was correct in her guess. When his descendant nodded, the translucent shinobi placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. You have nothing in common with the Titan of Time. You're not at all like him. As his time limit approached, Ashura's body began to fade. Naruto, never think like that. Naruto stood there in the moonlight, his hands locked into fists, resolve on his face. He's correct. What was I thinking, comparing myself to that jerk? I'm nothing like him. Even if she doesn't realize it, I'm making a promise to her. I'll always be there to defend her from anyone who want to hurt her in any way. That's a promise, and that's my Nindo.
Ria silently pondered to herself as she watched the blonde mortal from her window. I was completely mistaken about him. He truly is a one-of-a-kind mortal. For a few more minutes, the tearful Titaness watched Naruto practice the stances, moves, and strikes of the Furinji style, which he had also been taught by the elder today, as well as the Seikuken technique, before closing her window and lying down on her futon. Ria closed her eyes with a little smile and a hint of pink on her cheeks after wiping away the small tears of ecstasy. To be continued.
That's it for this part, guys. Thanks for listening to this video. If you did enjoy this part of the story, like, share, and subscribe for more, and thank you all for your support, and have a great day.